Hello, and welcome back. Let's jump into tonight's podcast. So imagine, it's 1875, the midnight run from New York's crowded tenements. Not cattle cars, though the smell of sweat, fear, and unwashed wool would say otherwise. These are immigration parties. 200, sometimes 300 kids crammed shoulder to shoulder, some as young as 4 clutching a single change of clothes and a cardboard tag pinned to their lapel with a number. The train doesn't stop for comfort, it stops for inspection. This is the Orphan train movement from 1854 to 1929. And this was America's first industrial scale experiment in childhood. Not a footnote in history class, and it's not a feel-good rescue, right? With quotes. This was the moment the system turned kids into freight. They were movable, marketable, and erasable. And between 200,000 and 250,000 children were shipped west from the eastern cities like New York and Boston to the farms and small towns of the Midwest and beyond. And yes, even in our state, here in Illinois, these same trains pulled into depots in places like Danville on the Toledo and Wabash line, Decatur and Macon County, Rockford, Dixon, and Odell. Farmers from even Effingham County and crossroads in between showed up with wagons ready to pick over the cargo. And so tonight, we're not here for the textbook version, like, are we ever? No, we want what's not in the textbook. We want what's outside of the textbook. And so we're breaking the system that invented the foster care blueprint, the one that still erases identities, commodifies the bodies, and markets success stories while the rest disappear into the fields or worse. This is the industrialization of childhood, so buckle in and welcome to episode 51 of Breaking the System. The Industrialized Child, Orphan Trains, and the Hidden Rails of American Rescue. I'm your host. Glad you guys are with us tonight. Hope you have a wonderful night and you enjoy listening to our podcast and watching us on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. Here we go. Let's jump into it. So let's look at the architect and the philosophy first. The hero, or was this just a social engineer? So Charles Loring Brace, he wasn't a villain that was in a cape, right? Like a superhero villain. He was a Yale-educated Protestant minister who walked the slums of 1850s New York and saw 30,000 street kids, the dangerous class. Why were they dangerous? Well, they were begging, stealing, shining shoes, dodging drunk adults, right? And so he founded the Children's Aid Society in 1953 and pitched his quote-unquote immigration plan like a divine upgrade. Rip the kids from the vice of the city and plant them in Christian farming families out west to save the Republic's soul, right? Or so he told us. So Brace believed environment trumped blood, and the city bred criminals, right? Even till this day, there's more criminals in the city than there is in rural towns, just because there's per capita, there's more people, right? And so the prairie, they bred citizens. But dig deeper and it smells like social engineering with a side of eugenics light. These weren't all orphans. Thousands had living parents, poor Irish and Italian Catholic immigrants who just simply couldn't feed them during the famine waves and industrial crashes, which both of those were inevitable, right? We're trying to build a new nation. Of course that's going to happen. So Brace's Protestant machine scooped them up anyway. The goal, what was it? Well, it was to purify the bloodline of the expanding nation by relocating, re-educating, and yes, often converting the children of the undeserving poor, right? Because if you're poor, you are undeserving of those kids. Those kids need to be put somewhere else. Of course, that was his idea. So, full of questions, aren't we? Was he a hero who emptied the streets? Or the original systems guy who decided that some kids' heritage were disposable for the greater American project? Well, history's answer was both. And the tension is where the rails start to creak. So let's look at the auction block, right? Don't forget, McAllister Sweet Tea, the only sweet tea you ever need to buy. Nah, just joking. So, pull into any Midwest stop. We're looking at places like Lafayette, Indiana, Decatur, Illinois, or a dozen others, and the ritual was the same. Kids were scrubbed, dressed in their one clean outfit, lined up on a train station platform or a literal stage. Farmers and wives circled them like livestock at the county fair. Kind of like a pageant, so to speak, right? Except you don't circle the pageant, but you get the idea. Open your eyes, let me see those teeth, they would say. Roll up your sleeves, show me your muscle, they would say. Boy, can you swing an axe? Girl, can you mind babies and churn some butter? All good questions that these people would ask at this time, because that's what they were needing kids to do. So primary accounts describe children rejected at 5, 6, and 7 stops before someone took pity or needed cheap hands. And the term put up for adoption was born right here. Kids literally put on display. No background checks worth the name, no follow-up for years, just a handshake and a signature on a loose piece of paper. And so post-Civil War, abolitionists called it exactly what it looked like, a loophole for unregulated labor. Slavery was dead on paper, but a strong 12-year-old boy could still be adopted for free farm work until he was 18 or 21. Critics north and south labeled the trains a new form of slavery, and the system didn't really give a care. It needed bodies for the western or the westward boom, because people were traveling west, and for the gold rush, for building houses, for cooking, cleaning, gardening, all of those things. We needed kids to do that stuff, right? So the eraser, clean breaks, sibling separations, and religious warfare. Let's look at those things. So the real violence wasn't the ride. It was the clean break policy. Siblings were deliberately split at different stops to prevent unhealthy attachments to the old life. Kids were told, or sometimes forced, to forget their names, to forget their parents, to forget their faith. And what about those pesky birth certificates? Well, they were lost or never filed. New identities handed out like train tickets. And the Children's Aid Society kept spotty ledgers at best. Many placements left no trace. And so this wasn't accidental. It was the policy. Erase the past to manufacture the future. Have we seen that before in other systems within the world, within the United States? Absolutely, right? And so the religious warfare, was there some of that? Of course so. The Protestants ran the show. Catholic kids, often not true orphans, but children of immigrants that were too poor to keep them, were funneled into Protestant farm homes in the Midwest. Priests and nuns screamed child stealing. And the New York Foundling Hospital, which was Catholic, eventually ran its own trains, but the damage was done. A generation of Irish and Italian kids baptized Methodist on the prairie, and the rosaries buried in the cornfield out back. Thousands of parents never saw their children again, and the system called it what? Salvation. But the families called it theft, right? So let's take the three little dresses. This is a story. One Iowa writer's mother kept the three tiny dresses she wore on the train inside a cardboard box for 50 years, and she never spoke of the journey. When her daughter finally asked, the box became the only proof, and that was a quiet monument to the shame that followed train kids into royal life. Being an orphan train rider meant you were marked. Kind of like other people that's been marked in different societies, right? So these kids were marked. The kid who came from nowhere, the charity case, the one whose past was a locked drawer. Then the PR wins. John Green Brady and Andrew Burke rode the same 1859 train as boys. Brady became governor of Alaska, Burke governor of North Dakota. The system loved trotting them out, proof that any so-called street urchin could pull himself up by the bootstraps and govern territories. Never mind the 200,000 plus others who ended up as indentured field hands or runaways or even worse. And success stories sold the program. Okay? Where else have we seen that? In other systems in modern society. We're only told the successful stories, right? Because success sells that particular program, okay? And what happens to the rest? Well, it's trash. It's invisible. It's the story that we don't talk about because that story doesn't sell the system, okay? And so the rails never stopped, proverbially. Let's take a look from the orphan trains to the Epstein files and today's foster crisis, right? So the last orphan train rolled in 1929, but the system didn't die. What happened? Well, it evolved. Those same principles: move the child, break the past, place for utility, keep records very thin, became the foundation of modern foster care. Sparse vetting, identity loss, cultural erase, and the quiet commodification of vulnerable bodies all trace back here to this time that we're talking about. And so reforms happened in the form of like child labor laws and adoption standards, but the core tension remains. When does saving a kid become erasing them for the convenience of the powerful, right? Or for the proverbial system, okay? Now we layer in something that a lot of people are talking about. I mean, everybody should still be talking about this, but we don't. We should be screaming from the rafters and hanging signs all over the place. We're talking about the Epstein files, right? Those unsealed court documents that we've gotten, right, from the Guthrie versus Maxwell case. We've got things like flight logs and names and depositions. And so those aren't 19th century ledgers, but they expose the exact same pattern, just dressed up in a modern dress. And that is powerful networks moving minors through private jets and islands with identities blurred, records sealed or lost, and a handful of convictions masking the scale. Right? And that's the new Orphan train, right? It's the same system. It's like a pig in a dress. You take the dress off, it's still a pig, right? You take the dress off this, it's still an Orphan train. Okay? It's still happening. It's still going on. It's never stopped. So those of us that were like surprised that this has happened, this isn't the first time and it's not the last time, right? But we need to know that this stuff is happening. We need to have an open mind. We need to be asking these critical questions and linking past events to future events, right? And so the Orphan trains absolutely are linked to the Epstein files. It's the same frickin' thing. Okay? And so the Orphan trains shipped kids on iron rails under the banner of Christian charity. Epstein's circle allegedly moved them on private flights under the banner of elite access. Okay? Or if you read the Epstein files at all, they're under the idea of things like pizza or jerky. Hey, can you deliver some of that jerky at 10 o'clock tonight? In through the back gate? Like, read some of the Epstein files. That's how that stuff reads. It's very perverse, okay? And how some of these files and how some of these elite professional people are talking about food. It's very weird. A normal human being does not talk about food like that, okay? Come on, guys. We know what it is. Don't lie to yourselves. So it's the same thing, both operating in the shadows of influence with minimal oversight. And both left generations asking, who really benefited? Was it the children? Or was it the system that needed bodies to fill those voids? And so it was the farms back then, and now it's influencing networks now into what? Very perverse stuff, right? And I would bet my dollar that the same perversions that are going on now were going on back then. It just wasn't talked about. I can almost guarantee it, okay? We know it was, guys. Come on. So here's our critical thinking question, okay? If the system that quote-unquote rescued these 250,000 kids by auctioning them, splitting them up from their families, and deleting their histories became the blueprint for today's foster care, and if documents like the Epstein files keep revealing how the powerful still traffic and silence the vulnerable with impunity, then here's the real question. Are we still riding the same rails, just with better marketing and sealed court files? Which I think we are, but it's my opinion. Don't take my opinion for it. Look more into it, okay? Or, there's an or here, or do we finally have the courage to break the entire track and build a new one that values a child's identity or the child's heritage and humanity over placement quotas or just elite convenience? Okay? So we've got a couple different critical questions for you guys to think about. And you've got to be honest with yourself. Stop lying to yourself. You knew this stuff was going on, right? We all know the stuff's going on. We're just not part of it. We lucky few, right, that don't get our child stolen or abducted or kidnapped in the middle of the night or on a shopping trip or on vacation, because all of those things do happen, right? And they're thrown back into the proverbial train station of 2026 or 2025 or whatever it is, right? And so in modern times, the proverbial trains are gone, right? But the system isn't. And so what are you going to do about the next stop? And with that, this was Breaking the System. I hope you guys like the content that we're pushing out. I hope you're sitting back and asking yourself these critical questions and you're thinking about what all of these systems are doing to you as a person, to your family, to society in general. And if enough minds and enough of us wake up, that is the change that we need to change the future, okay? And so I realize that me just sitting here talking isn't doing much, but at least it's spreading the word. At least it's opening people's minds. At least it's asking people to put your differences aside, whatever those differences are. And I'm asking all sides, red, blue, black, white, brown, everybody, rich, poor. I'm asking everybody the same questions. And hopefully enough of us answer the questions in the same manner with the same answers. So, with that, you guys have a blessed night. We'll see you next time, and we appreciate it. Have a good one.